Hey, welcome back everyone. Got a different type of video for you guys today. I don't know, some of you might notice that I'm riding a different bike. I just got, well, I'll explain how I ended up with this bike, but this is a new bike I just added to my garage here, and it is a 1982 Honda CB900F. Many of you probably aren't familiar with this bike, and it's probably because they only made this bike for 2 years in the US and I think 4 years overseas. And this is kind of the successor to the CB750, and then shortly after we had it in the US here for 81 and 82, and then in 83 they went to the CB1000 or CB1100, I can't remember. So this is kind of a unique bike in the sense that it's not only did I only make it for 2 years here in the US, but there was two versions of it, the CB900C and the CB900F. The C was a drive shaft driven, more upright, less sporty kind of version, and then the F was the more, you know, sport bike kind of version, which is, this is kind of a sport bike before there were really sport bikes on the market. And it's kind of, you know, it's definitely more of like a sport bike instead of a super sport. You have a much more upright seating position here. But you know, for a 4-cylinder 900cc engine, it's still, you know, pretty quick on the get-go. It's definitely heavier than any modern day sport bike, but it you know, it's no slouch. So a little backstory how I got this bike. A good friend, a family friend, good friend of ours, he had this bike. I used to do a couple rides with him and stuff like that, and he's had this bike for a while, and he was moving, was trying to sell the bike, and, you know, was having trouble moving it. He finally came to his closing date. He was like, listen, I haven't ridden this more than a few hundred miles in the last 5 years. I know you'll ride it. Just if you want it, you can come pick it up. To which I'm super appreciative for him to offer that to me, and you know, I couldn't not take him up on it. This was such a cool bike of his, and I was really excited to take him up on that offer. He kept this bike pristine. I don't know if you can see the odometer here. This doesn't even have 15,000. It's got 14.6 on it. And everything on this bike is original. There's no aftermarket stuff here, and he also, along with the bike, gave me all the parts he had. And because this bike, you know, wasn't a super popular bike, they didn't make it very long, the market for parts got a little tight, and he feared for it. He grabbed, you know, pretty much everything he could. I started going through some of the boxes and stuff like that. I have chain tensioners and other rear shock, turn signals, and all kinds of things. Anything he could get his hands on, he grabbed before they, you know, really stopped making all this stuff. So, but he kept this thing in you know, amazing condition. It's got almost no miles on it. I mean, relatively speaking, for a bike from the 80s, the early 80s. And he kept it, you know, running in great shape. He just, you know, it just didn't ride that much. And but everything on it is pretty much stock. It needs to be, you know, cleaned up, at least be carried after a little bit. But, you know, and you know, you got some little things like these chips up here. But I mean, other than that, this thing rides great. He gave this to me in the summer of the COVID pandemic, and now he had lived up the street from my parents' house. Or when I went to go pick it up from him, I didn't have the proper ramps to put it in my truck. Brought it down to my mom's house, and I asked her, I'm like, can I store this in your garage until get it registered and pick it up? She said no problem. The DMVs around here, though, were a mess for probably over a year after COVID hit. They just were never able to really figure out how to get everything running smoothly for way longer than it should have. So I finally got it registered back in May, and I am pretty much a year later. I was able to get it registered, and I'm now bringing it back. I did, you know, a quick walk around inspection, obviously, before riding it. You know, I got the lights work, the brakes work, you know, everything seems to go. I got nothing leaking, there's oil, all that. I haven't really gone through this in a lot of detail, so this is pretty much the first ride, other than that ride down the street from his house to my mom's house. And I gotta say, this thing rides really nice. I really like this bike, actually. It rides, it's pretty quick. You know, again, not as quick as a modern day sports bike, but if I want to go fast, I'll hop on my R1. But this thing just comfortably cruises, and it is such a smooth ride. You know, I'm really excited to get this thing, you know, all tuned up, you know, make sure everything's all nice and clean, running it tip-top shape. But it's as of right now, it's a great riding bike, and I'm excited to, you know, put some miles on this thing. Because he has kept this bike completely original for this long, and because he you know, he gifted it to me knowing that I was going to ride it, I don't think in good conscience I could really dive into this. I've seen some really cool people build some really cool cafe racing stuff out of this, but I mean, if this was, you know, a junk bike that needed a ton of work, that would be definitely something I would try and take on this bike. But this bike being as good a condition as it is, and as original as it is, I feel like I just couldn't do that. I also couldn't, you know, I'm still, although you know, our friend moved, he did not move that far. I still see him, and I couldn't look him in the eye and tell him, you know, all that work, all that time and money he spent keeping all the original parts, I just, you know, tossed that out the window as soon as he gifted this bike to me. So I think I'm just going to keep this original, maybe some, you know, minor things here and there, but I think for the most part I'm just going to be cleaning this up and keeping it you know, as stock as possible, keeping it, just getting it cleaned up, tuned up, just ride it how it was meant to be ridden. So this ride back to my house from my parents, it's almost an hour ride. So I'm going to try and take it kind of easy, because like I said, I didn't really have time to work out everything with a fine-tooth comb. I just did the, you know, the basic inspections. It should be fine for this ride, but you know, there's definitely some stuff. It hasn't really been ridden in the last 5 years too much. So, you know, I'm sure the tires are past their lifespan, so, you know, I don't want to go too crazy on them. The brakes, they're working fine. They're a little, they don't stop real quick. I'm not sure if that's due to, you know, them being just an older, not as advanced brake system, or if it's, you know, needs to be bled, but it doesn't feel too squishy. It just doesn't stop real quick. But it's something I don't really want to, something I'll play around with when I get home, but I don't want to push it right now. It's just not worth it. Just get this back. But man, this thing rides nice. This honestly might be one of the smoothest riding bikes I've ever had, although in all fairness, I was never really looking for ride quality when I was buying any of my bikes. I mean, this thing's just fun. This is just a fun bike. I'm excited to take this thing out for some spirited riding once I, you know, go through everything. It's pretty quick when you want it to be. It's sporty enough, but smooth enough riding. Like, I can see riding this for a little while. The lack of windshield, you know, you don't want to do a lot of highway driving, but I mean, this thing's just fun. I'm just having a great time. Just notice this weird thing that happens. If you take your hand off the left handlebar, you start to get a little shimmy in the steering. Don't love that feeling. Almost feels like it's, you know, the start to death wobble, but as soon as you put your hand on it, it goes away. I might have to do some research into why that's happening, because I don't want to have to worry about every time I take my hand off the handlebar that I'm going to start going into a death wobble. As I'm riding, I don't know if you guys can see if you can get a good view of that. The left fork seal looks like it might be leaking a little bit. It's a little wet. I don't remember seeing that before, so that might be another thing we gotta address, but it's all part of it. You get a bike this old, there's gonna be things to replace. And here she is in all her glory. 1982 Honda CB900F. As you can see, you know, it's in really great shape. It looks almost like it did 1982. Everything's all OEM on it, and it's in great shape. Now, although it is in great shape, there is, of course, some things that are, you know, showing its age. Like this cover down here, you know, the oxidized aluminum, that's going to have to be cleaned up at some point. But let's give this thing a wash and see how much we can clean it up. Alright, now we're all cleaned up, we can get a better look at this thing. We still got some oxidation here on the exhaust, not nearly as bad on this cover, but let's see what we could do. Maybe we can polish some of that off. Same thing on the mirrors here, but overall this bike cleaned up real nice. You know, it wasn't a full detail or anything like that, but at least got the 5 years of dust off of it. So next I'm gonna grab some metal polish, see if I can bring some shine back to some of this metal. Let's see how it goes. So that made a huge difference. A little bit of polish goes a long way on this metal. Really got this to shine. Some of this stuff, like, you know, this cover down here, as I said, it's just a little too far gone. I tried doing a little polish, it wasn't worth it. Same thing with these, it's a little too pitted, but I did what I could. I also polished up the mirrors up here. I did the headlight bezel, the handlebars, and, you know, pretty much everything that I could, and this is what we're left with. I'm really happy with it. As I said, you know, I'm really excited, really grateful. Doug, if you ever watch this video, thank you so much. Can't thank you enough. I'm gonna have a lot of fun with this bike. As always, thank you all for watching. I hope to see you again next time.